bank scandal and government woes, increasing likelihood of a glacial flood, another walrus visit, birds are terrorizing a North Icelandic town, and more in this episode of the Reykjavik Newsdesk. First up on Newsdesk, Parliament's Finance Committee is asking to see the termination contract with Birna Einarsdóttir, who was the director of Íslandsbanki, a bank which is now embroiled in a scandal. Amazingly, the current chairman of Íslandsbanki's board, Finnur Árnason, is not releasing it yet. He said he's going to release this in the time that the law allows, which is kind of an amazing reaction, really, because it's not like the information that's in the termination agreement now and later is going to change. In most likelihood, this is a stalling tactic wherein he's hoping to just release this agreement once the dust has settled about this scandal a little bit. As reported, Íslandsbanki is in the middle of a scandal following a 1.2 billion ISK settlement agreement that they paid to the Financial Supervisory Authority over their mishandling of the sale of 22.5% of the bank's shares in March 2022. Now, this scandal has very far-reaching effects that goes all the way up to the finance minister, and I did a very detailed breakdown of this scandal and why it's affecting the government in my previous video, so you can go check that out too. Speaking of which, a new poll from Maskina shows that dissatisfaction with the ruling coalition of the Left Greens, the Independence Party, and the Progressive Party has never been greater. Specifically, this poll shows that 54% of respondents were unsatisfied with the government's work so far. And if that doesn't seem like a lot, bear in mind that only 18%, that's 18%, are satisfied with what the government is doing right now. The dissatisfaction is growing and the satisfaction is decreasing. I've linked to the entire poll, which is in Icelandic, in the description below, so you can check it out for yourself. But what I thought was really interesting about the demographic breakup is amongst voters of the three parties in the ruling coalition, only about half of them are happy with the job that the government is doing. And that's not exactly a vote of confidence, is it? Speaking of polls, a new poll from Procent shows that more Icelanders are happy with the temporary fin whale hunting ban than are unhappy with it. Specifically, 48% were happy with the ban, 36% are unhappy with it, and 16% had no opinion on the matter. Women were more likely than men to approve of the ban, and disapproval with the ban increased with the age of the respondent. And in completely unsurprising news, those aligning themselves with the center to the left were more likely to support the temporary fin whale hunting ban, and those on the right were more likely to disapprove of it. Incidentally, Minister of Fisheries Svandís Svavarsdóttir released a memo explaining what was supposed to be a further explanation for her reasons for issuing this ban, but there's not really a lot new in it, except for notably that she was aiming to have the shortest possible time frame for a temporary ban on fin whale hunting, and that she instituted this ban before the hunt began rather than during it, because she felt it would have been more disruptive to issue a ban during the whale hunt than before it, which, yeah, that does make a lot of sense. It's not likely to make the millionaire who hunts whales for hobby any happier, but yes, that explanation does make sense. Okay, but enough politics for a moment. How about some animal news? Everyone loves animal news. Our fair shores have once again been graced by the presence of a walrus, this time in Arnarfjörður. Walruses, while not native to Iceland anymore, do occasionally show up here. They're usually swimming between Iceland, the Faroe Islands, the British Isles, and mainland Europe. And I say that walruses aren't native to Iceland anymore because history tells us that there used to be many walruses in Iceland. In fact, on the west coast of Iceland, but the settlement period pretty much wiped them all out. I also want to point out a very nice Icelandic word being used in the headline of the story here, flatmaka. This is a verb that literally means to sprawl, but it literally means to flat belly, which I think is the most perfect description of what a walrus does on a beach. He's just flat bellying. Arctic terns are arriving in Snæfellsnes in lower numbers than before, and scientists believe this is due to the fact that the food that they feed on is in lower numbers, but also because they didn't recover so great from the bird flu. If you've ever visited Iceland in the summer, especially if you go into the countryside, chances are you've been warned about these birds, because if you go anywhere near their nesting grounds, they will not hesitate to attack you and dive bomb you and try to peck you. In fairness, though, Arctic terns have the longest migratory path of any animal on the face of the Earth. They travel between Antarctica and the Arctic regions twice a year. So when they arrive here, they're tired, they're hungry, they're irritable. All they want to do is hatch their eggs. So you know what? I empathize with them. In other bird-related news, black-headed gulls have been terrorizing the residents of the North Icelandic town of Akureyri. This is an amazing story that basically reports that residents have been complaining that these birds have been amassing downtown. They poop everywhere, and they'll accost people, especially people who have food. Like, they will literally wait outside of shops for people to come out to ambush them, or people that are grilling before a sports event. These gulls will appear and try to steal food from them too. Now, Iceland has some pretty strict animal protection laws, and technically speaking, all birds that are native to Iceland are protected by law. However, some birds are protected during only part of the year. For example, black-headed gulls are protected from April 1st to August 31st, and so the residents of Akureyri have had to use other methods to defend themselves against the black-headed gull menace. For example, they've used ultrasonic alarms or like spiked belts to put out, but even these are temporary measures that are not going to be fully 100% effective against black-headed gulls. But you know what? I would say that the people of Akureyri just have to learn how to live with them. These birds were here first, after all, and they learned to live with us. A new poll from Gallup shows that 2 out of 3 Icelanders are happy with LGBTQIA matters being taught in Iceland's primary schools. 41% of respondents say they believe queer education goes far enough in primary schools, 16% say that it goes too far, and 43% said they believe more should be done, that they should be teaching more about queer issues in primary schools. Majority support remained regardless of gender or age or education level or where somebody lived in the countryside. Politically, majority support was almost entire, with one exception. The majority of voters for the right-wing populist Center Party would believe that this education goes too far. Now, these poll results are entirely unsurprising. Queer education has been a part of primary and secondary schools across Iceland for years now. And to most parents, this is just not a big deal. It's just another subject in the curriculum. In other news, the peninsula of Bessastaðir is now a protected area. For the unfamiliar, Bessastaðir is a peninsula that juts out a little bit from Garðabæjar, and it is the homestead of the President of Iceland. President Guðni T.H. Jóhannesson told reporters that in celebration of this event that neither an airport nor apartment buildings would be built on this land. Now, what the president is referring to here is Vatnsmýri, which is an area of south-central Reykjavik, and it's where the domestic airport currently is. Now, controversy has been swirling around this airport for years, if not decades, centering on one single question: should the airport stay or should it go? For people in the countryside, the airport is very important to them because you can just hop on a country plane and bop on down to the Reykjavik domestic airport, and you're right there in the center of downtown, and you're one bus ride away from wherever you need to go. For those of us who live in Reykjavik, however, it's not only the source of a great deal of noise, but we're also experiencing a housing crisis at the moment. And so the idea has repeatedly been raised to move this airport elsewhere so we could build thousands of apartment buildings on Vatnsmýri instead. However, whenever this idea is seriously floated, members of parliament who hail from the countryside vigorously oppose it, and so this domestic airport isn't going anywhere. I predict that we're going to have trains and streetcars and floating cities before this airport moves out of Vatnsmýri. The seismic activity under Mýrdalsjökull Glacier in South Iceland continues, with many earthquakes being recorded at a magnitude of 3 or greater. Furthermore, it appears as though geothermally heated water is beginning to rise to the surface. This could in turn melt the ice of the glacier and result in a glacial flood. And if that happens, it is likely to flood the river of Mulklis, which flows from the north to the south. Now, if this worries you, bear in mind that there's also signs of caldera movement under the volcano Katla. However, as I've said on many other occasions, volcanoes are incredibly unpredictable, and so it's impossible to tell when exactly Katla is going to erupt. But it will erupt. And finally, Irish Days were celebrated last Saturday in Akranes, West Iceland. Why Irish Days, you ask? Well, because the town itself was founded in the 9th century by two brothers named Thormóður and Ketil, who were themselves the son of a guy named Bresi, who was from Ireland. So in honoring this heritage, they have Irish Days every summer, and that includes voting for the most red-headed Icelander. And this year's winner was Pálmar Vigmansson, who you can see here. He was also the 2010 winner, and I think you can see why. So, most red-headed Icelander, kudos to you. And that's all I have for you today on the Reykjavik News Desk. Again, be sure and like and subscribe, and I want to make two announcements, two dates to mark on your calendar. First of all, July 17th, I will be releasing my single-topic video about the cultural and political divide between urban and rural Icelanders. This was a video decided by a viewer poll, and I put viewer polls up on my Patreon, wherein patrons participate in this poll, and they dictate what single topic I report on next. This was the winner. I'm really excited about it, so look forward to that, July 17th. Also, July 22nd will be my next Ask Me Anything session. And again, this is for patrons, wherein we all get together, we hang out, and you can ask me questions about anything, as the title would suggest, about myself, about Newsdesk, Reykjavik, Iceland, whatever comes to mind. But mostly, it's just a time to hang out and have fun together. We always have a great time, and I hope to see you there. Both of these things are things you can participate in through my Patreon, which is linked in the description below. Which reminds me, I want to thank Corinne Vasquez, Marion Ward, Christopher Hunter, Marion Moores, Kimberly McDaniel, Iceman98, and Octavia Hrund Jonsdottir for being patrons on the $20 level, Ian Kingsley and Laura Johnson for being patrons on the $15 level, and Hafstein Himmeljómi Reginusson, Stephen Ellis, and Vivi Carvalho Schaffner for being patrons on the $10 level. You folks rock. That's all for me at Newsdesk. Be good to each other.